come with access to instant savings too. You do you and get rewarded. Instant savings available on select properties. I'm Jeff Biggs, NBC Sports Radio.
All right, it's time for Tri-City Sports Now, and I'm Marky Bilson. And I want to tell everyone out there, let's give you a couple of things, just a couple of final notes on what you heard with Phil Fulmer, who expressed an interest, or certainly didn't put the kibosh on playing again in Bristol, which is exciting for Vols fans. I also think, especially Vols fans in the Tri-Cities, I would also suggest, and you're going to hear me ask Jeremy Pruitt in just a second, he's open to playing the big boys, so to speak. The Oklahomas of the future, which UT will be playing a couple of years in the future. But, you know, in the past, say the Oregons, Notre Dame, Miami, UCLA, those programs out of conference being scheduled, Oklahoma not long ago, you know, those teams that historically the Vols played. I remember them playing when they played Syracuse national championship year, 1998, that, you know, Syracuse at the time was considered a much, much, much better football program than they are now. And actually, I guess it's one of the things when I look at Syracuse now and then, and I say, could that actually happen to UT? And I know that's unthinkable for some people, but this last 10 years and such, you know, at the time, Syracuse in 98, and, you know, Vols win on something that, I know when Darwin Walker and Donovan McNabb played for the Eagles, and Philadelphia Eagles, and went to the Super Bowl in 2004. Was Walker still with the Eagles then? Anyway, but when they were playing together in the early part of the previous decade, they used to argue about that game all the time, and McNabb thought there was a pass interference penalty that McNabb certainly did not think should have been called. And I've talked to some Syracuse players who were on that, and they, to a man, do not necessarily think that they lost that game and all this. That was won in the closing seconds up at the Carrier Dome by the Volunteers. So anyway, yeah, you might think that the losing team would have that opinion too, you know, I mean, whining about officials' calls, yeah, that's always real fun to listen to, right, you know. Anyway, but I did say this, and you're going to hear this, Phil Fulmer saying, look, I don't want to hover around the huddle. That's big, because I thought, and I still am somewhat inclined to believe, that one of the reasons why the Vols hired a coordinator and not another head coach to come in at Knoxville, one thing, it seemed as if no head coach wanted the job. And that's telling. People don't like to hear that around here, but it's telling. Number two is I think that people were, and I say people, other head coaches were a bit wary of working for another football coach who had won the national championship and maybe having him over his shoulder. Help every way I can. I think Fulmer is going to be huge, and he's going to make a lot of media appearances. I mean, remember they used to have the 2 press conferences with the Vols? I don't have any insight, but after coming to that Caravan, it would not surprise me if there was a Pruitt presser and a Fulmer presser. And you're going to find out why very shortly when you hear Jeremy Pruitt talk to the media. You know, UT could have got Mike Leach. Jeremy Pruitt is the anti-Mike Leach in terms of personality. So remember that. And Fulmer has it all over. And by the way, one thing about Fulmer, you may have seen this. Blake Topmeyer wrote this, and I've been waiting all week to get to it, and I just haven't been able to. Anyway, Fulmer, his 4-year AD contract has a lot more fire for cause provisions than his predecessors. They range from getting too drunk to perform job duties, I don't think that's going to happen, to failing reasonably cooperate with UT's efforts to prevent sexual assault. This is going to be huge in future contracts. Title IX, and I hate to say it, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be in this Me Too generation, and it's distressing because I do think that a lot of, and I don't mean to say we should have a boys will be boys attitude, but I really and truly believe that a lot of things that traditionally have not been looked at as sexual harassment might be. Give you an example. Remember a few years ago when Brent Musburger was calling a national championship game, and A.J. McCarron's now wife, then girlfriend, was on, they focused on her in the stands. They said, "Boy, is that a attractive woman. Whoa!" And he kind of made a big deal out of it. And Musburger got a lot of flack for that. I didn't think he should have, because I don't think he said anything inappropriate. I mean, yeah, A.J. McCarron's girlfriend was and now wife is quite a looker. But there was a lot made of it. And I really don't think that it was harassment per se, or really all that inappropriate. I mean, if you were watching the game, that's what you were thinking. I mean, Musburger was only giving that thought that was in certainly the back of my mind, and I think just about everybody else's. But, yeah, there's a thought, well, that isn't appropriate. And professional workplace and all this, I don't like it to a certain extent, because I do think it's going to take some of the human touch out of office relationships, if you will. I mean, there's going to be, if you've got to worry about every least thing that you say, and could this be taken the wrong way, it's going to result into, very much cold relations between men and women in the office. It's going to be, because it's going to have to be. It's just that simple. And yeah, I mean, future contracts are going to say, look, we can fire you for cause if there is anything with sexual harassment or anything that the Me Too generation might object to, rightly or wrongly. There are 7 ways Fulmer can be fired for cause that was not included in the contract of John Curry, incidentally. But multi-million dollar buyouts can ensue from firing a coach or an AD, so athletic programs want to have ways out so they don't have to pay all that money. I mean, think about this. The Vols are still paying Butch Jones more than $8 million. That's why he can take a job that'll pay him $35,000, right, with the Alabama Crimson Tide. They settled, and they tried to fire John Curry for cause, and eventually they settled for a $2.5 million buyout. That was $3 million less than what he was due, but still, he cost him $2.5 million. Fulmer's buyout stands at $1.6 million if they want to fire him, and it's not for cause. But schools are trying all over the place to fire people for cause. Jim McElwain, for instance, claimed he'd received death threats, failed to prove them. He was due a buyout of nearly $13 million, but after that he settled for approximately half that, $7.5 million. Okay, he's not starving. Kevin Stallings was a terrible basketball coach, at least in terms of wins and losses, at Pitt. His buyout was more than $9 million. Now, firing for cause is not that you didn't win enough games, incidentally. Parties settled the dispute, but the terms weren't made public. Connecticut claimed just cause when it fired men's basketball coach Kevin Ollie in March after a second straight losing season. NCAA is investigating UConn for possible recruiting infractions. Ollie was due a buyout of about $10 million and is appealing the decision, trying to get all that money. So there's a lot out there, and there are going to be more and more provisions in contracts making it that much easier to fire a coach or an AD for cause, thus preventing the buyouts. It's just the nature of the business. Fulmer has them. I got to tell you, I don't think that Fulmer, showing up drunk for work, I'd be surprised if Fulmer did that, or really if any coach did that, to be brutally honest with you. Anyway, I'd be surprised if Jeremy Pruitt did that. And he's who you're going to hear from next in this press conference from the Vols Caravan. Now, while we're talking here, I want you to listen to the tone and really the personality of Pruitt. That's what I'm going to comment on when this presser is over.
No, until it gets game week. I mean, it's really a long ways off. So, which is a good thing for us because we've got a bunch of things we need to work on.
Being asked about the ETSU game.
Summer during fall camp. So, no, I don't feel like game week.
How do you break down, different programs do it differently as far as how they scout? I mean, will this be an entire coaching staff scout, or will you assign different assistant coaches to games? I mean, what is your strategy for that?
No, we do the same for every opponent. We actually done spring scouting on every opponent that we face, and we go back again in May and do it and spend several days on different opponents, and because you want to work on them during spring, during the summer, and during fall camp. So you got a good idea, and that way everything's not waiting until the week of the game.
So did you gear some of your spring work? I know you had a lot to work on, but was any of your spring work geared towards seeing some of the types of offenses?
We did not specifically work on any teams this spring. We just prepared for it.
Everybody around here has September 8th kind of circled on the calendar. What are your thoughts about the ETSU game?
First of all, Randy Sanders is a colleague of mine. We worked a year together, and we had a blast. I think he's a fine coach. He golfs about like I do, which is not very good, but we went out there and chased the ball around a few times. So, but a very good football coach, and he'll do a fantastic job.
Have you had any conversations with him since you took the Tennessee job?
Yeah, me and Randy talked a couple of times, for sure.
Coach, as you wrap this up, you've been all across the state, down into Georgia. Just, what is your impression of the Tennessee fan base? Coming off an 0-8 season, and the kind of passion that you've seen on this tour from them.
Well, growing up, I knew all about the Tennessee fan base. So it's one thing that they've done. They've not really disappointed everywhere we went. For this big orange caravan, you can see it, the passion. Everybody's hungry. Everybody's ready to get started. They can't wait. So it's a good thing.
That 25-minute drive from Bristol Speedway, Tennessee played there a couple years ago. What was your level of interest in playing a game there at some point down the road in the future?
To me, it's important if you're going to play away from your stadium or a home and home. You want to play at a place that has recruiting ramifications. And obviously, if you looked up through, Virginia and going up through the DMV there, headed up north, we're really the first stop for the SEC. So, if Coach Fulmer schedules us a game there, we'll be there.
Can I ask your range of distance? Maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours from Talladega. Did you follow any NASCAR going out to Alabama? Did you ever do that?
I never did. Never made it to Talladega.
Over the last few years, there have been a couple of Kingsport players who have been on the Vols roster. Is this the area that you're hoping to pull a couple more out of and focus on recruiting over here?
Well, for us, we want to recruit the best players. Where they're from, I don't know that matters. Obviously, if they're from the state of Tennessee, sometimes you get guys that grow up being Tennessee Volunteers, but I think it's important that we sign the best players.
We've seen a couple photos, I think, the new weight room and renovations. Why do you think those changes were needed, and maybe what do you feel like better about the changes this way?
Well, if you're going to lift weights, you want to have the most up-to-date stuff that's out there. So we wanted to make sure that we had that. We want to make sure that when we spend our money, we put the student athletes first. When we're recruiting football players to Tennessee, we want to make sure they understand that we're going to pour everything that we've got, which is available to us, to help them develop as a a student first and then as a football player. And to do that, you've got to invest in the weight room, and we did.
I know there's been a lot of talk in future scheduling. Some people are looking at the home and home coming up with Oklahoma, and they're saying, well, rather the Vols play sort of the teams, the other guys that maybe you have that are, say, glamour games out of conference in the year, Pitt, BYU, Nebraska, former national champions like you trying to restore past glories. What are your thoughts on playing, shall we say, the elite teams out of conference in the future?
I think it's great. To me, if you're going to play a home and home series, I think it's fantastic. You want to play the best out there. Now, can you do it every week? You're in the SEC, so you're playing the top tier programs in the country. But when you look at a out of conference slated, I think it's really good for the fans. The fans enjoy it. I think it's good for college football. We're playing West Virginia this year. They got a fantastic program. They've been there. They're established. They're going to have a really good football team. It's in Charlotte, which we're recruiting the state of North Carolina. Tennessee's been really good. Majority of the players have been from Georgia and North Carolina. So, hey, we got to go there so they can see the Tennessee brand.
I think summer school starts, a week from today. Are you expecting the rest of the entire class to be here in time for that, or are there a couple guys maybe you don't expect to be here next week?
Well, when you start getting guys coming in, when you all over the parts of the country, people get out of school at different times. Some folks have been out of school for a week now. Some will get out this week. Some don't get out to the second week of June. So we have no control over that. So when they get out, they'll be there.
A couple of days ago, Coach, you were asked about Keller Christie. You kind of gave us your thoughts on what impact he might have. I'm curious about J.T. Stroud as the incoming freshman quarterback. How do you give a guy a look? I know you've been running 4 offenses in the spring. How will that go for J.T. as far as what to expect from an incoming freshman?
Well, I think for J.T. and Keller both, Will and Jared have 15 practices under their belt, and they've had 4 months of being in the system. So those guys are obviously that far behind. I think that they'll need to spend time to catch up. JT coming from a high school is going to be probably a little bit further behind because he's, the rigor of going to college, understanding, the expectations. But he'll get as many reps as the rest of the guys. And, he seems to be a sharp guy that has a big arm. So we'll see how he develops, in fall camp.
This is Caravan stop number 5. What's the most interesting thing about the facilities and the staff?
No, I think really when you talk to the fan base, I think everybody at Tennessee is extremely hungry. We all want the same things. I think really we probably, everybody's talking about, well, we just want this, we want that. I think maybe we need to raise our standards a little bit as a fan base.
When you ask some of these questions,
do you think that was funny?
I kind of did. That standard thing. Well, because Coach Fulmer was talking earlier about someone said 0-8, and he said that's like a gut punch to him. When you do some interviews and you hear questions, does that intensity? Is that as determined as you are? Is that something that's kind of hard to turn down as much as you've got invested in this? And from what your former players say, this is the way you are every single day in practice.
Well, the team I coached on last year didn't go 0-8, so I had nothing to do with that. But whether it don't matter about the teams that went undefeated or the teams that struggled, it shouldn't have a bearing on next year. Each team right now sits the same and basically controls their own destiny. The thing about football that I like is, the most talented team doesn't always win. It's the team that plays the best for 60 minutes, and it's our job to get the best out of our players. Our players play to their best and do it for 60 minutes.
That's the extremely, extremely soft-spoken Jeremy Pruitt. And I got to tell you, after listening to him, I wondered, this is our leader? And you never want to have that be your leader. Guy you want to move next door to you, sure. But did that come across to you as somebody who is going to motivate men? That personality? Maybe he turns it on and off for the media. I don't know. But extremely soft-spoken. That's why I said I wouldn't be surprised if Phil Fulmer had his own press conference and Pruitt had his own press conference going forward with the Tennessee Volunteers. Tri-City Sports Now. More thoughts after this.
Most common symptoms of hearing loss are